Welcome to Patrick's Book Reviews. So today I'm going to be going through 50 books that I plan to read before I turn 50. And I stole this idea from another YouTube channel called Book Thing, and he also said he stole it from someone else as well. So you know what they say, two wrongs make a right. And if you get a chance, please check out his video. I'll link to it down in the description below. So what really made me decide to do this video is I realized in exactly 50 months, I'll be turning 50 years old. So it kind of is impeccable timing. It works out really well. I can just do a pace of one book a month on this list. Of course, I'll read other things as well. And before I jump right in, just a couple things. I'm going to choose books from 50 different authors, and so I'm not using anyone twice, and I'm not doing any rereads. So these are all books that I have never read, but I'll kind of just quickly talk about kind of why I want to read the book, or if there's any other interesting story from my life that ties in with that book. And then finally, a little spoiler: this list is actually only going to be 49 books. So you're going to pick out the final book, or I would like you to help me pick out the final book from this list. So please, in the comment sections, leave a comment about what book you think I should read. All right, so I've got two precariously high stacks of books next to me. So I'm gonna jump right in. I'm starting with books that I own a physical copy of, and I don't own all 50 books yet. And by the way, this list is only gonna be 1 through 25. So I'll start talking about those first, and then I'll get into books that I do not own a physical copy of, but I will try to buy. So right off the bat, with number one, we have Dante's The Divine Comedy. I know it's supposed to be one of the funniest books ever written, and I have actually read. It's divided into 3 parts. Each are 33 cantos long, and so the first one is the Inferno. I've actually read that. It wasn't that funny though. And then the second part is Purgatorio, I believe. And the last one is Paradiso, or Paradise. This edition here, I had picked up when I was back visiting family in America. And this I got at Barnes & Noble, and it's like a special Barnes & Noble edition. And it's pretty cool. I don't love the font on the cover, but everything else looks really cool. It's Henry Longfellow is the translator, and so of course he's a famous poet. It's got like engravings throughout the book, so there's all kinds of like pictures involved as well. There's like the beginning. It's got one of those like all-time best first lines, kind of similar to maybe like you think of A Tale of Two Cities or Anna Karenina. But I'll just read the very first beginning of the first canto. It says, "Midway upon the journey of our life, I found myself within a forest dark, for the straightforward pathway had been lost." And so that's how Dante starts this epic poem, and I absolutely love those first lines. Currently, I'm kind of working my way through the classics, and they're kind of on a back burner while I'm reading other stuff. I'll read a little bit of them each day. And so I've worked through Homer, and I'm now working through Virgil, the Aeneid. And I'm almost finished with that. And that's good because Virgil is actually a character in Dante's work. The second book on this list is Don Quixote by Miguel Cervantes. And this is another, absolute classic. I'm sure everyone's familiar with. I did begin reading this book at one point in my life, but I think I abandoned it fairly early on, and so I want to finish this. It's quite a long book. It's over 1,000 pages, but it's one of the most famous novels ever written. So this book's about 17th century Spain. It was written in 1605, I believe, and there's not much to say about it. It's just a book I need to read, and it's kind of an epic journey. Supposed to be pretty funny as well. And number 3, we've got James Clavell's Shogun, which is a work of historical fiction. I'm planning to read this fairly soon. And this is a book. He wrote like a 7-book series, maybe is it 7 or 6? I always forget. A 6 book saga. It's called the Asian Saga, and each book focuses on a different country. This one's focused on medieval Japan, and there's a man who is shipwrecked, John Blackthorne. So he lands on Japan and, obviously finds himself in a very dangerous situation, but I think he slowly works his way up, and I think eventually he becomes a samurai. There's also a civil war going on in Japan in this period, so looking forward to this one. Historical fiction, something that I want to start reading a lot more of. Sticking with the historical fiction theme, I have Bernard Cornwell's The Archer's Tale at number 4 on my list here. Now, this one is part of a 4-book series called The Grail Quest. So you can obviously imagine what that might be about. And I guess it kind of takes a look at the quest for the Holy Grail in a way that seems historically probable. And Bernard Cornwell, he's someone I've been looking to get into as well. This is actually a book my son found at a book fair, so I didn't know anything about him, but then I've been hearing about him on other booktube channels. He also wrote The Last Kingdom, which many people I'm sure are familiar with right now. I think it's maybe a Netflix series or something like that. That's quite a long book series as well, and he's just written a lot. He's written a ton of books, very prolific. So I'm looking forward to getting into him and starting out with this 4-book series. Next up, we got Stephen King with The Gunslinger, which is book 1 of the Dark Tower series. So this is a 7-book series, and it's, many people consider it to be kind of King's magnum opus. It's a lot of his other works tie into this series or into this world, and so I'm going to do kind of like an extended read of this series with other books tied into it as well. But I'll probably talk about that more in a future video. I guess this first book is supposed to be kind of confusing. So many people, it's not really their favorite book of the series, but I'm going to commit myself to the whole series in this before I'm 50. So I'll try to get through all of that, and I'll see how I feel about this first book, and I'll definitely plan on continuing on with this series. This next one I probably should have just thrown in right after Dante, but this is John Milton's Paradise Lost, which is a blank verse poem, and it follows the fall of man with Adam and Eve, the temptation from Satan, and it's another, and Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained. So I'll read both of those. They're both in this same book. And not a lot to really say about this one. It just seemed like the next logical step to go to after Dante. The 7th book on this list, it's another book that I actually did start reading at one time when I was in university, and I never finished it, but it's Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. And I can't remember why I abandoned it, because I actually do like Aldous Huxley. I've weirdly read a lot of his other fiction and nonfiction as well. He's written quite a few essays, and I've read quite a bit of his work, but for some reason I've never read Brave New World, which of course is a dystopian novel. Many times it's talked about with Orwell's 1984, and Huxley kind of has a little bit different take on what the dystopian future could look like. It involves more of like the government manipulating people with drugs. The 8th book on this list might be a book that most people are actually not familiar with. I just somehow inherited it from somebody. I think someone actually passed away, unfortunately, and I got to kind of comb through his book collection, and I picked this one. And this one is called Four Rains, and the author's name, I believe, is pronounced Kukrit Pramod. And he's super interesting. Like, I was just researching a little bit to talk about this book because I didn't know too much about it. This is a historical fiction novel as well. But this guy was actually Prime Minister of Thailand at one time. He was also, he's a grandson of King Rama II, so he's got royal blood. And he also, he was in the movie The Ugly American with Marlon Brando. He played a prime minister actually in that movie. This book is a historical fiction novel, like I said, and it follows a woman named, I think her name is Maploy, through 4 generations of kings, from King Rama V until King Rama VIII. So it follows 4 reigns. Obviously, that's the title of the book. And he's also written some other fairly popular books. I think one is called Paidam in Thai, which would be like red bamboo. And another one is Lai Chi Wit, which would be many lives. And I think those are translated into English, but this is the one I have. And I think this might be like his most well-known work. This one was originally serialized in a newspaper, in a Thai newspaper. And I think this book was released in 1953. So there you have it, 4 reigns. The 9th book on my list is a Walker Piercy novel called The Moviegoer. Now, Walker Piercy is an author that I've also read quite a bit of his work. I think like probably my favorite novel of his that I've actually read would be Love in the Ruins. And I've also read some of he's written several essays as well, or he has books of essays, and he's a real interesting guy. In his life, he had a lot of tragedy as a young man. Both his grandfather and his father took their own lives, and I know his mother was in a car accident where she drove a car off a bridge with Walker Piercy's younger brother in the car, and they think maybe that was intentional as well. But anyway, his mother passed in that accident, and his brother survived, luckily. And so they were raised by Walker Piercy's uncle, who was a lawyer, a Southern lawyer, so that he grew up in the South, I think the Deep South. And Walker Piercy, he's a very intelligent man. He was set to be a doctor, and he was actually in medical school, and I believe he was doing work on a cadaver, dissecting it. And is dissecting the word you use for a cadaver, or is that just animals? I don't know. But anyway, he was working on a cadaver, and he contacted tuberculosis, and so he spent time in a sanitarium. I think this was about the time of World War II. And in the sanitarium, he started reading existentialist literature. I believe like maybe Camus, possibly like Kierkegaard, and maybe Sartre. I can't remember, but anyway, eventually he came to Dostoevsky, and he was heavily influenced by Dostoevsky, and that's why he became a writer. And so this is the first book that he wrote, the first fiction novel that he wrote. And this did win a National Book Award. I forget which award, but it was a big award. It just says the National Book Award. And it's all his novels are just kind of about like a man, usually like a young man, struggling to find himself. And so that's kind of what this one is about. And it's just the book that kicked it off for him. It's probably his most famous novel. I'm not sure if it's his best. I'll have to read it. All right. Here we've got the complete works of William Shakespeare. Now, I'm not committing myself to finishing the complete works of William Shakespeare by the time I turn 50. I just kind of want to get started on it at least. And I'll probably actually turn to this after Milton, just kind of keep it in the classics back burner. Now this, I'll ask for your help. If you can make a recommendation of where you'd start with Shakespeare. I'm familiar with quite a few of his stories, and I probably read some of his plays in high school and whatnot. The only play I request not to start with is probably Romeo and Juliet, just because I'm too familiar with that story. So I was thinking maybe Hamlet or King Lear. And my plan is to watch an actual stage production of it, hopefully like maybe like a 1950s BBC type of deal. And then I'll read the play as well from the book. So Shakespeare, help me out with that one. All right, now I'm getting into the giant pile on the right side of my desk. We got Thomas Mann, The Magic Mountain. This is a book I've actually been intending to read for many, many years. Another book I inherited somehow. And of course, Thomas Mann is a famous German writer. Actually, I had a friend from Germany, and he came to visit me with one of his other friends. And his friend's favorite author was Thomas Mann. He talked about actually having a signed copy of a Thomas Mann book. This one actually, I didn't really know what it was about, and I was just kind of reading a bit on the back, and it sounds pretty cool. It's like a guy who ends up in a in a sanitarium. I believe he also got tuberculosis, perhaps. And he's in a sanitarium in the Swiss Alps, and he ends up staying there for like 7 years. And apparently it gets into a lot of philosophy and religion and those kind of things. So I'm always kind of interested in those kind of topics. The next novel I'll talk about is a science fiction novel. So I'm kind of shifting a little bit here. And this is written by Dan Simmons. It's called Hyperion. And this book, I've heard a lot of people talk about this book and recommend this book. I guess the interesting thing about it, if I understand right, is it's got like 7 chapters, and I could be wrong about that, but it's got, I don't know how many chapters it has, but I think each chapter is written from a different character's perspective. And I think it's also written in kind of like a different sci-fi style. So stylistically, like every chapter is quite different as well. Got an epic cover. I actually bought it's a 4-book series, and I bought the like cheap mass market paperback edition, mainly because like the covers are just really awesome. Like the normal paperback edition had like kind of a lame modern looking cover, but this is from like 1989, and it's kind of got those vibes to it. And actually all the books look really cool. Like this is, I think these are just a few of the other ones. This one, I love this cover. It's so cool. Yeah. And Dan Simmons, been looking through some of his other work. He's another like quite prolific author, and all his sci-fi stuff looks super interesting. He's also written horror. I guess even like Stephen King was praising his horror writing. I think he's done historical fiction as well. So he's an author I'd like to dig into. And now back to a classic that I'm somewhat embarrassed to say I've never read, but this is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. And this is another book that I've been wanting to read for a while, and I actually just ordered this book as well. It just came in the mail with the Dan Simmons books I was just talking about. I ended up getting the Penguin Classics cloth-bound edition, which is like pretty cheap, and it looks really nice. Like, it looks cool. It's got the problem where everyone talks about they always put the sticker on the back, so it leaves that smudged area when you take the sticker off. But I was expecting that. Other than that, it looks really nice, feels real sturdy, and looks good. It's got your ribbon. I think maybe when I was a kid, I might have read one of the like abridged like classic illustrated versions of this book. I seem to remember that, but it's a big book. It's like, yeah, it's over 1,200 pages, pushing 1,300 pages, but it's a classic. Okay, these next couple books are pushing me back into fantasy. I think, did I have any fantasy books yet? Maybe not. Maybe I'm just beginning to talk about fantasy. The first one is George Martin. So this is a Game of Thrones from the Ice and Fire. Is it Fire and Ice or Ice and Fire? I always forget that. From Ice and Fire, yeah. A Song of Ice and Fire. Okay. So this is a famously incomplete series. George R. Martin has not finished it yet. I don't know if he ever will. But another one I probably don't need to talk too much about. It's just, but I'm looking forward to getting into this one. I guess it's got a lot of political intrigue and all that good stuff, so should be fun. The other fantasy series right here is Brandon Sanderson, and this is Mistborn. Now, Sanderson's an author that I've kind of had on my radar for a long time. And I remember being at a book fair, and this young man, maybe 18 to 20, in Bangkok, came up to me and he said, "Excuse me, sir, you've got an awesome beard." My beard was longer at that time, and no one's ever said that to me in Thailand. So I was like, wow, this kid is special. And we started talking a bit. He had overheard me recommending, I think I recommended, what was it? Oh, David Copperfield. Yeah, I recommended that to someone. And so he was going to buy that book based on my recommendation. And I kind of asked him, and he's really into fantasy. And so he was asking me what kind of fantasy I like. And I was like, well, I don't read a ton of fantasy, but I mean, I love Lord of the Rings, of course. And And so he had recommended Brandon Sanderson. That was his favorite writer, and I'd heard of him, and so I was like, well, where should I start with him? And he had recommended, is it The Way of Kings? I think I might have that wrong, but I think that's the series. And for some reason, I could never pull the trigger on it. Like, I just had some aversion to Brian Sanderson. I don't know what it was. Like, I kind of wanted to read him, but part of me really didn't want to. And then the other day, I was in a bookstore, and this just popped out on the shelf. Kind of in rural Thailand where there's not a lot of books, and so I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a calling to read this book. And so I'm going to start with the Mistborn series, mainly because I bought it. This is book one, though. And I can't remember how many books this series is. I think it was originally 3, and then he kept making it longer. So let me know what you think. If you're a Brandon Sanderson fan, let me know what you think about Mistborn. Is this actually a good place to start? Is this a good series? Did I make a mistake with not going with The Way of Kings? And now we're moving into a Gothic novel. So I think that means they wear a lot of black and listen to Marilyn Manson, which is weird because this book is from 1847. So I didn't think Marilyn Manson was even that old, but I guess he's been around for a while. I never understand really what Gothic means. Like when it's a Gothic novel, I know it's referring to I think it's referring to a time period, maybe. I know there's Gothic architecture, but I never understand with novels, what does that mean? It makes me think of Frankenstein and Dracula and stuff, but fill me in, educate me, illuminate me, because I don't know. But anyway, this is Charlotte Bronte with Jane Eyre. I think that's how it's pronounced. And I don't know, I'd heard a little bit about Bronte. I didn't actually realize that it's 3 sisters. And so I'm not even sure if I got the sister I was originally intending on reading, because there's Charlotte Bronte. There's also, what are the other 2? Emily Bronte, and she wrote Wuthering Heights, which is another very famous novel. And finally, Anne Bronte, who I guess wasn't quite as famous as the other 2 sisters. What can you do? And again, I don't know a ton about what this book is about as well. I just kind of felt compelled to read this. It's a Gothic masterpiece, though, of character and emotion. And I guess this is about a child as she grows up, and there's some kind of dark and mysterious secrets that begin to unravel throughout the story. I guess maybe that's what makes it Gothic. Let me know in the comment section. The next 2 books are books also that my son actually has read before me. He's a teenager. The first one is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. He found this one in a bookstore, and since then I have actually heard a lot of people recommend this book. Another book, I don't know a ton about it. I obviously haven't read it. But I do know it's got a lot of 80s pop culture references, maybe video game references as well. So that alone makes it somewhat compelling for me. And it'll give me something to talk about with my son. And also Lord of the Flies, William Golding, an oldie but a goodie. Of course, I'm familiar with this story. What year was it? 1954, so it's been around for a while. I think everyone knows the premise. A group of plane goes down, a group of boys are stranded on an island, and then chaos breaks out. So sounds cool, and it's one of those books I can't believe I've never read it, so we'll take care of that. So the next kind of group of books are books that I heard about on YouTube just from watching other booktube channels. A lot of them I think came from Red Fury books as well, so thank you for that. The first one would be A Song for Arborn by Guy Gavriel Kay. I've heard a few different YouTubers talk about Guy Gavriel Kay, and I know he's a fantasy writer. He writes in the fantasy genre, and he doesn't generally get into those big long series. I think he has a lot of standalone fantasy, so he's somewhat unique in that sense. And I think he's also unique in that he doesn't get deep into magic and all that, which I'm not really super into myself. And so I guess his fantasy is fairly realistic, and it also involves, it's not your typical hero characters. He'll have characters who, it might be a cook or a mosaicist, something like that. And with him, I'm not sure actually if this is the best book to start with. So if you're a Guy Gabriel Kay fan, let me know where you would start. I can be a little flexible with this one. Next is The Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. And this is part of a 3-book series, I think, the Farseer trilogy. But it ties into her larger work, which is called The Realm of Elderlings. And I think that's like maybe 13 books long. So I think she writes like a lot of trilogies and maybe like 4-book series, whatever. And she kind of combined those all in a long saga. Now I've heard her writing is supposed to be quite incredible. I guess her prose is great. Her storytelling's great. She's someone who's been on my radar for a while, so I'm really excited to get started with her. The next novel is another first book of a trilogy, and that would be The Passage by Justin Cronin. This book, obviously, it's the first book of a trilogy, and it's kind of an apocalyptic tale. It sounds very similar to The Stand in the premise anyway. A super flu type of virus or a super virus breaks out from the government on accident, and so it wreaks havoc. And then the protagonist is a young girl, I believe, and that's all I really know about it, actually. I know this one, a lot of people like this trilogy, and I think Stephen King praised it highly, so I guess he didn't feel like this guy's just stealing The Stand. Next up is another book I heard about on Red Fury, and this is Forever by Pete Hamill. And I think this book's from 2011. Pete Hamill is a historian whose main area of focus is New York City. And in this book, the main protagonist makes some kind of a deal where he gets immortality, but he needs to spend the rest of his life in Manhattan. And so I think it's a way for the author to kind of take us through the history of Manhattan from the past to the present. So, it's a great way to learn some history and kind of intriguing story as well. We're almost there. This is the 23rd book. This is another book I've heard highly recommended, and it's Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. And this is part of there's a sequel to this book as well. The sequel is A God in Ruins. And this book is one of those books where there's a girl who's born. I think she immediately dies, and then she keeps her life keeps repeating it over and over. I think this one takes place in the time before the Second World War, and maybe every time she repeats her life, she's trying to improve upon something or trying to stop World War II from happening, maybe stop Hitler, if I remember right. The 24th book on the list is Ghost Story by Peter Straub, which was written in 1979. And this is a horror novel, as the title would suggest. I think it's about a group of older men, maybe 4 or 5 men, and they sit around telling tales, probably ghost stories. And there's some kind of event that happened in the past that that's haunting them all. And that's about all I know about this one, but I think it's a classic of the horror genre. And the last book on the first half of this list is Lonesome Dove by Larry McMurtry. Is that his name? Larry McMurtry. Larry McMurtry. This is a part of a series, but I think a lot of people, this is kind of like a book you can read on its own without reading the rest of the series. And it's a Western novel where 2 friends from Texas go on a cattle drive to Montana, I think. And it feels like one of those kind of like journey stories where there'll be a lot of like sleeping out under the stars. And I'm a sucker for those kind of books. So this one sounds really awesome. Okay, so there you have it. Those are my first 25 out of the 50 books that I'm intending to read before I turn 50 years old. You'll notice they're all novels. I forgot to mention that. I'm not including nonfiction in this. So I do read a lot of nonfiction, but this is just 50 novels or 50 works of fiction, technically, that I want to read before I'm 50. So again, help me in the comment section, any of the things I asked about, and also help me find that number 50 novel, whatever you would recommend. Now, obviously, you don't know what the second half of this list is, but just go ahead and throw out some suggestions. And you obviously don't also know every book that I've read in my life, but try your best. And I just want to hear your suggestions. And even if it's something I've already read, it would be cool to see what books that you would recommend for me. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with the second half of this segment.